Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Lava Lava, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes featuring veterans, culture, and small businesses. I'm your host, Michael Tan. Before we get started, a quick reminder to our listeners to follow, subscribe, and leave a review if you enjoy the show. Now let's jump straight into it. Today we will be talking with Lulu Wolfgramm, Director of Empowered Living Services, a program of PICTAR. Talofa, Lulu.
Hello, Malolele. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So Lulu, can you briefly tell me about your background?
Yeah. So I actually have been a volunteer in the community for many years. And while volunteering, I actually was recruited by PICTAR for a position. I started off with PICTAR as a community health worker. Really, feet in the streets, just trying to get people information, resources, and all of that. And then over time, I'd been able to work my way up, and now I'm the director for the Empowered Living Services program. And within this program, we provide direct services and connections for resources to community members. And we do this through grant funding mostly. We do have a couple of sponsorships out there that help us to really be able to provide for the community. But born and raised as a Tongan American here in Salt Lake City, Utah, I growing up didn't really understand where we fit in as Pacific Islanders, and so that was part of the reason why I was really engaged in community work as far as volunteering and really trying to be more engaged in culture for our community. My parents raised me to be very much Tongan, so I am very cultured in the Tongan background, but I didn't see that amongst all of my friends that I hung out with. And so I kind of felt a little bit more cultured, but then I also was always kind of stereotyped because I really strived to do well, I guess. And so sometimes people would say, oh, you're like a Fiapalangi, but I don't think that, wanting to do well is Fiapalangi. I think it's really an opportunity for us as Pacific Islanders to adapt, because that's why our parents came here, right? Our ancestors brought us here to give us that opportunity. And so, like I said, I've really just been engaged in community, and now working with PICTAR, it really allows me an opportunity to be that connection for a lot of people.
Now, can you briefly, real quick, cover what PICTAR is, what it stands for?
Yeah, so the acronym stands for Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources. For those of you that don't know, PICTAR actually started as a violence prevention group with our men's Gawa talks. And the goal there was really to provide a space where men could have conversation about violence prevention and the things we were seeing in our community, especially with DV. Now, as that was happening, a lot of women started wanting to, engage and connect. And so then we started the Women's Empowerment Group. And from there, we kind of created a culture of looking at overall health as we connected with our community. PICTAR is actually going to be at its 10-year anniversary next year as a nonprofit. Prior to that, about 3 or 4 years, Susi Felch Malohifu'o, Simi Poteki Malohifu'o, and Sincera Te'o, they founded PICTAR and were really just working as volunteers, trying to find those resources that were able to help our community, and then realizing that there was an opportunity to build on that, and that's how the nonprofit started. And so our goal is to really create sustainability for all community members. Of course, our main focus is our Pacific Islanders, but we serve about 85% Pacific Islander and 15% underserved of other communities. And like I said, PICTAR is going on its 10-year anniversary next year. And so been around a little while, but, we're still growing and trying to find more opportunities to help the community grow.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, today we're going to be discussing raising health awareness in our community, especially in the topic of Alzheimer's, cancer, and caregiving. Could you share why you're passionate about health issues, especially these topics?
So I see our community as very disengaged in understanding preventative care. A lot of our community members are more reaction, right? And so that for me is a concern, because how do we prevent health issues if we don't even address health concerns, right? And so we have a lot of community members that, I think, because of the way that our community is, we are very much spiritual, right? There's not much fear of what's to come after the life after this, right? Life after death. And so because of that, a lot of our community members kind of address things as, if it happens, it happens. And we want to be more proactive in saying, the opportunities that we have to learn about these different illnesses allows us to better take care of ourselves. As we have families, right? We have our kids, our grandkids, our parents, grandparents. We all want to spend as much time together here on this earth. And to do that, we need to be able to have these conversations, even if they are difficult. And so, as we've been providing opportunities for a lot of community members to learn these things, we're seeing much more engagement and much more inclusivity, where they want to be a part of what's happening and understanding that it's not something to just react to.
So we're trying to bring awareness to our community to talk more about these health challenges, right? And
Yes.
and, and we I wanna start first with Alzheimer awareness. What are some common misconceptions about Alzheimer's, and how have you encountered it in our community?
So, unfortunately, there is no cure for Alzheimer's. The preventative side of Alzheimer's is understanding if you are susceptible to actually have the illness. And if you are, there are things you can do to prolong actually having the effects of the illness. And so I myself am actually experiencing this within my own family, because my father is actually suffering from Alzheimer's. It started off as just a specific case of dementia, the starting stages, where he was just very forgetful and not really sure of some things that were happening, and couldn't keep up with a lot of memory. And over time, it has developed into the full illness of Alzheimer's, where now he barely remembers us. Even his logic is not there any longer. When he has conversations, he speaks more gibberish than real. He doesn't have complete sentences, and if he does, he refers back to memories of being in the islands. And so for my dad, he talks a lot about being in the islands and he's got to catch the boat, get to the bus, all of that stuff, remembering his life back in the islands. And so we have to adapt to his reality. And I think in our community, because we're so strong-willed, sometimes the thought is, well, it'll get better. And so we're going to force our thoughts on them. We're going to force what we believe is reality on them. And that shouldn't be the case, right? It should be more of understanding what they know as their reality. Because, think about it. If you were unable to remember who was around you, where you're at, the fear that you have. And I think that's what a lot of people overlook in our community specifically, because we just are such strong-willed people. And so we think that we can fix it by forcing our reality on these patients that have Alzheimer's. And so that's one thing that we really have seen in our community, is that a lot of our families that have a member that has Alzheimer's, they're having to care for them on their own. No training, no support. And the only reason why there's no support is because there's no resource connection. And there's so many resources out there that can be used and are available. It may not always be aligned with cost effectiveness for us, but I think that's something as families we also need to be more aware of and discussing, is how do we financially have money set aside for these times when things like that happen.
So we'll come back to the resources,
Yeah.
but you spoke of your experience with your father.
Mhm.
What what are some early signs of Alzheimer's that you've experienced or that you know of that people should be aware of?
So, everybody loses their keys. But if you are seeing a pattern of losing your keys like every single day, that's something, these little small hints of memory loss are kind of the starting phases of there's something probably happening. And so when you're in that starting stage, it's really good to talk to your provider and just mention those things. Letting your provider know, hey, I've been noticing that I've been forgetting my keys on a regular basis. Like, it's to the point where I feel like I never know where my keys are. And then they can usually do some tests just to see if there is something happening, or if maybe it's just a need for you to use a different brain muscle or something. And so with my dad, that's kind of where it started. Was he was forgetting where his keys were. Then it started to be, he wasn't sure if he had eaten his dinner or his lunch. We would ask him, well, did you eat dinner? And he's like, well, I'm not sure. And so it was just little things. And then he's like, oh, you know what? I think I did eat something, but I don't think I had dinner yet. So it was just little things that slowly progressed. So you just have to be mindful and aware of your own well-being and family members that are around you on a regular basis, like what's happening with them. And if you see things that you think may be a hint of Alzheimer's, then I would recommend talking to a provider, because that's the only way you're going to find out.
Yeah, so this is a difficult time for families having to, especially when they encounter a family member with Alzheimer's, and now they have to adapt to this disease, right? So how can families best prepare themselves when a loved one is diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
I think it's a family conversation that needs to be had. So that's what we had to learn the hard way, is that it cannot be a decision that's just left to one person in the family. It has to be a discussion of, what are we willing to do? How are we willing to do that? And let's find out what resources we have. So the Alzheimer's Association is a national organization that has resources in every state. And you can look them up online. And they actually have lists of all kinds of resources that are available for anybody that's going through these hard issues with Alzheimer's. You also have to ask yourself, how long is enough time? Because this is the piece for the caregiving side. So our families end up suffering because we don't want to put our loved one in a home. And I totally understand that. In the starting stages when my dad was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I didn't want him in a home. But as he's progressed, I'm seeing that eventually we will have to have him in a home. And it's because of his well-being. He's going to literally have to have someone with him 24/7. Doors will have to be locked and watched, because if he opens the door and walks out, we may not find him. I mean, it was like I want to call it like an alarm, but we had this necklace that he used to wear, and it had a tracker on it when he wasn't quite as severe in his Alzheimer's. And so we would, if he wandered off, we would just make a call to the company and say, hey, we need to know where he's at. They'd give us the coordinates. We'd find him. Everything would be okay. He's no longer wandering because he doesn't have as much mobility. And so we don't worry about that. Now it's more of just making sure that his mentality is okay, in the sense of he's not agitated. Because the illness gets to a level where the patients just become angry, and they will hit anyone and everyone.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, because I feel like Alzheimer's is a big issue that's here in Utah, especially trying to bring awareness to it. You come across a lot of silver alerts for our elderly, just wandering off, and they put out that alert to try to find them. So it's very important that we as community know what Alzheimer's is, able to identify it, what resources are out there for families who are struggling, especially those who don't want to give up responsibility, to a caregiver or to another organization to take care of their loved ones. So it's a very important topic for everyone. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing awareness to this topic.
Yeah, I just want to add one more comment. There are families that are able to long term provide for their loved ones long term while they're in those harder stages, right? But it's just understanding that if you cannot, your wellness, your well being is now at jeopardy. And so there's actually statistics that show a lot of caregivers end up having more health issues because they don't care for themselves because they're so concerned about the one that they're caring for. And so that's something that I just want our community to be aware of is there's nothing wrong with using the opportunities of nursing homes. But find the right one. Go check them out. Go talk to the people that are there. Make sure it's a good fit for you and make sure it's someplace that you can go to on a regular basis. You don't have to just say, oh, it's the first one they recommended and that's what we're going to take. It's just like anything else that you decide on in life, right? Make sure it's a good fit for you and your family. And to those that can actually provide that opportunity to their loved ones and care for them long term, I give you kudos because it is not easy, especially when they're in the further stages of the illness.
Yeah, thank you. Now we're going to go into a topic that is, I would say, prevalent or common in our community, and that's cancer. What should people know about preventing cancer and the importance of early detection? Because I know that we see all these commercials and we kind of put it off, ignore them, but people don't realize the importance of trying to prevent cancer before it happens and to bring cancer awareness.
Yeah, so I mean, again, going back to just seeing your provider regularly, your regular doctor, going in and making sure that you're just getting your overall health looked at. So cancer is another space that I have experience. I'm actually a breast cancer survivor. I've been in remission for about a year and 5 months now. So one conversation I think that is definitely needed in our community that is lacking is talking about our health history. That's something in our community is not very common. And so that's one way to really understand if you could be at risk, is understanding whether it's something that is within your family history, right? So breast cancer, actually, statistics have shown that there are more people who suffer from breast cancer who don't have it in their immediate family as if medical history. So that was interesting to me, but that doesn't mean that it's not something you still want to look into. There's still a chance, right? Every cancer type has a different way of being noticed. And so that's something that you really, like I said, should start with that conversation of your family's medical history and understanding if there is a risk of someone coming up with cancer. Once you kind of understand that, then you can have those conversations with your providers to see if, like, what can we do? Are there tests we can run? Are there things that I should be aware of and looking out for that could be a reflection that I could be someone who's suffering from cancer? So because cancer is unfortunately, the one of the highest killing illnesses in the world right now, because there's so many different forms of cancer. I mean, you can get cancer in your brain, you can get skin cancer, you can get stomach cancer, prostate cancer. I mean, there's so many different forms of cancer. And so the thing is start with that conversation with your family, understanding your medical history.
Yeah, and I feel that that's very important, especially when you're trying to figure out what illness you're going through at the moment. I know my wife is very aware of her family's history of cancer, so she does bring that up here there now with her provider, and they're very much aware of it. So she's undergone a major surgery that will hopefully prevent cancer in the future. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced especially as a cancer patient, and what families face, and how can communities provide better support?
Again, I think it's just having those hard conversations. As a community, if we can create more awareness in, let's be open to understanding what our medical history is. Because the thing is that cancer is not curable. It's just, you can treat it so that it I guess it's on pause is the best way to say it. So even though I'm in remission, they say that it's not technically cancer free. Because I've had cancer already, I'm susceptible that I could get another form of cancer. And so, but because I found it early enough, and that's where it's really important, is the early detection makes the treatment not as harsh. And then on top of that, it actually adds years to your survival rate. So like for me, I had to go through chemo for about 6 months. I went through a mastectomy, and then I had to go through immunotherapy. So my treatment, it was, like I said, I've been in remission about 1 year and 5 months, but my treatment itself was about 1 year long. And so if it's detected early enough, the chemo or the whatever the treatment is that your provider recommends, it isn't as harsh as it is if it's further down the road. So if you're diagnosed and you're at a stage 4, that's when it's just, if you decide that you want to take treatment, it's going to be very harsh treatments because they have to be very aggressive, right? But at the same time, the illness is also going to be very aggressive. So finding these things early in detection is really going to be the key to treatment not being so bad, and also giving you more time on your time as a survivor.
Now, are there any specific cancer support programs in the community that you want to share about or have made a positive impact?
So I was really excited that you jumped on one of the projects that we're on, which is a breast and cervical cancer awareness project. And our goal is to get women in front of more workshops where they can understand, like, what are some of the signs to look for that you could have something. And even if it's not cancer, it could be something just as a woman for women's health that makes you aware that something could be wrong, right? So that's currently something that is available. Both PICTAR and UPIC are providing that, and that's the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition. We're both providing those opportunities of workshops and mammogram bus events where our women can come out to a space where they feel more safe, because we're all there. There's no actual providers there. It's really the nurse team, the cancer team that does the mammograms, the techs and everything. So it makes it a lot easier on our community. I think also just the Huntsman Cancer Institute has so many different programs that are available to all community members, and a lot of these programs are free. And so if you are someone who has suffered from cancer or is currently going through cancer, I would recommend going on their website and just finding things. They have support groups, they have therapists, all those things. And I'm not ashamed to say that when I finished my treatment, while I was going through treatment, I wasn't thinking about my mentality. But afterwards, it was really hard to adjust. So I had to go to support groups and I had to start seeing a therapist. And it helped me a lot to really understand that I can now say that I hate cancer. When I first was diagnosed that I was in remission, I was kind of in this phase of like, oh, everything's great. I'm doing great. Everything's good. And then I just slowly was kind of in this down slope. Mentally, I was just not all there because I wasn't being honest with myself. I was trying to be, the positive thinker and on the positive side, and realizing that like I needed to be honest about it. And so that's what helped me to really say I hate cancer. And I feel for anyone that's going through it, anyone that's had to go through it, anyone that's lost a loved one or is dealing with a loved one going through it. Prayers and prompts to you, because it is very, very hard. And if we're not willing to face things in our health, it's going to be a lot harder on us.
Now you mentioned UPIC. Could you briefly touch on that? What is UPIC?
Yes, so they're another nonprofit organization. They've actually been around a couple years longer than PICTAR. So that, like I said, it's the Utah Pacific Island Health Coalition. And they're really trying to create more opportunities to provide services to the community as well in these different health industries. Sorry. They do a lot of the same things that we do, but they are really intentional about physical health and mental health. I think they put a lot more time into those specific spaces, where PICTAR is more of overall health. So we look at those things, but we also look at the sustainability of the individuals, which is a little bit different of an approach than what UPIC takes. But we partner quite often. Great team over there. They do a lot of awareness for like diabetes, and I want to say they do a lot of things with nutrition as well. I don't work for them, so I don't know everything that they do, but I know they're great partners and they are doing some really great work in the community.
Thank you. Now I want to talk about caregiving challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges caregivers face when caring for someone with Alzheimer's, cancer, or any other chronic condition?
Yeah, so, in our community especially, caregivers, I kind of made this point earlier, they tend to put everyone else before themselves. And so, especially when it's someone, that's a patient or going through one of these chronic conditions, they just spend all their time trying to take care of this person. And as they're doing this, usually their health starts to deteriorate because they don't take care of themselves. We actually did a survey last year, and I think we surveyed about 100 of our community members that were engaged in caregiving. And I think out of the whole group, and if I can remember correctly, there's about 5% that actually had some form of training in how to be a caregiver. Now, when I say training, there's CNAs, techs in the hospitals, in the nursing homes that help with things like bathing clients, helping them to stand, making sure that if they need help eating, being fed, all of that. And that basic knowledge and training is something that our caregivers don't get. They just have to teach themselves. And so they could injure themselves. Caregivers, if you don't learn how to pick up your loved one that's going through an illness, if you don't learn how to pick them up correctly, you could injure yourself. And so those were the things that we saw in our community in the surveys, especially, that people were saying, oh yeah, I've never been trained. I've never been told how to do these things formally. And I mean, when you're taking care of someone that you love, you don't think that you need that, but it actually is helpful for both you and your loved one, right? So I think it's really just that lack of knowledge, and again, our community being very strong-willed and trying to just make things happen, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think we need to be open to, we live in a land of opportunity. And so please take the time to get to know what those opportunities, those resources are.
Now, what support systems or networks exist for caregivers in our community that you are aware of?
So I will be perfectly honest. I mean, there's the Alzheimer's, or excuse me, the caregivers, there's a support group, and I apologize, I should have written this stuff down, but there's a support group that is available to caregivers, but it's not intimate enough. And that's something that we're looking into. So we connected with a couple organizations that are trying to create support for caregivers. There's one that's actually located out in Davis County. And I wish I apologize, I didn't take
Yeah,
notes.
that's fine. I could even post it on the description of the episode on for the resources.
Okay, yeah, I've got the information, I think, in my email. But there's an organization that they do a lot of support in really connecting to caregivers to find out if there's things that they can provide as far as like, can we like come and give you a break for an hour or something like that. And so they are the only organization that we have found so far that does anything like that. Because caregiving is not really, I guess, talked about, there's not as much support for it. And that's something that we are really trying to better understand. We're hoping that we can find the right partners, find the right funding to provide opportunities where caregivers can come to a space where they know their loved one will be taken care of while they take a break. Because sometimes that's what both parties need. Both the patient and the caregiver just need a break from their home environment, and it just space to breathe and rethink things and whatnot. But right now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of support for caregivers, and that's not just for our community, but in general, it's not talked about enough.
Now, this question is going to be a little bit off, but I've noticed that Tongans there's a lot of Tongan caregiving providers out here in Utah. Why do you think there's more Tongans than any other Polynesian groups that are very into providing care for people with chronic conditions and the elderly and those who are disabled?
That's a really good question. I know, like, my mom, she was a caregiver for many years. But the interesting thing is that when it came to having to be a caregiver for my dad, it was harder. So I don't know if it's because we, as Tongans, there's this mentality of like, we have to take care of our own. And so because that's what we're kind of brought up to do, a lot of community members take that up as also their employment, their work, the type of work that they provide. But again, like I said, it's really interesting to me that my mom was a caregiver for many, many years. She was even certified, had her CNA and everything. But when it came to caring for my dad, it was harder because it's more personal, right? So I don't know how to answer that in really saying that, oh, it's because Tongans are this way or that way. But I think it's, again, related to just as a Tongan and growing up in a very, very Tongan home, I was brought up that we take care of our own. Like my mom always said, we will never put your dad into a nursing home. And my mom would always tell me, you guys should never even think about putting us in a nursing home. And my thing is that, not that I want to, but if I can't take care of you, what is that doing for you? And so I guess I look at things a little bit differently. And then I think it might also be generational. The older generation, I feel, has really influenced a lot of us to be about caregiving. And so I think that plays a role in it. Again, just because that's the mentality in my Tongan home that I was raised with.
Yeah, and I brought up that question mainly because I know of 4 Tongan caregiving providers here in Utah. So shout out to them. So what's one key takeaway you'd like the listeners to remember from today's discussion?
I really would love, our community to be more engaged. Even if it's starting the conversation just within your family, understanding your health and your well-being, and really talking about medical history. I think that's where it should start. But once you are comfortable, really taking up the opportunity to talk to others that are either going through the same things or resources. I mean, we have a lot of organizations that are providing these opportunities and really taking the time to understand what resources are out there, right? PICTAR, UPIC, NTAS, the National Tongan Association Society. There's a new organization that just came around, Jayhawks out in the Rose Park area. They work very closely with the Rose Park Coalition. And so, if you are looking to find some type of connection to resources, Google it. Reach out to us at PICTAR. If we're not a good fit for you, we can, direct you to who might be a good fit for you. It's really just talking about these things and being engaged. I think if our community can do better, we'll be better, right? So that's the biggest thing, is just having conversation and being willing to engage. It's hard to be vulnerable, and it's hard to have these conversations because they're not easy conversations. Nobody wants to talk about what's happening that's dysfunctional in their body, right? But if you don't talk about it, then what happens? How do you get help? How do you not have to suffer? So just being able to have those conversations, I think, is a great place to start for all our community.
Now, where can our listeners find you and PICTAR and Empower Living Services and any other organizations that you represent? Now, shout out their social media and website.
Yeah, so PICTAR, we have a website. It's PIK2AR.org. On our website, you can find all kinds of resources and information. We also have a form you can fill out if you're just wanting to talk to one of us and find out what we can help you with. UPIC also has their own website, and again, it's upic.org. So pretty much all of our local organizations for our Pacific Islanders, ntas.org, they're all .orgs. And then, of course, on Facebook, Instagram, I'm not quite sure. So we were on Twitter, but we're not really using it much anymore. It's not very effective for our community. But yeah, Facebook and Instagram, look up our organization, PICTAR. Empowered Living Services also has its own page where we actually we try to share specific flyers for awareness that kind of give information. And then just, if you're looking to connect with us directly, when you go onto our website, all of our staff is listed there, and you can actually email us through that website. So again, like I said, PICTAR, PIK2AR.org. And then, of course, on Facebook and on Instagram, it's PICTAR and Empowered Living Services. And then, of course, our other two programs, BEAO and the Pacific Island Chamber of Commerce, also have their own pages on social media as well.
Now, before we close out, I like to give our guests the opportunity to ask a question to us. Usually I have a team, but just ask me a question. This is your one time to ask me anything, because I like to challenge myself or, basically learn more and just to improve myself. But do you have any questions for me?
So this is probably a little bit personal, because I know you're a veteran and I see all the things that you're doing for the veterans. What is it that you feel is lacking in our community when it comes to supporting our veterans?
And that's a very difficult question, mainly because I just entered the veteran community. I just started being involved for about a little over a year now. But what I see is there are a lot of veteran activities and veteran support, and I see the community supporting, but there isn't, how would I say it, enough activities, because we only celebrate veterans, or especially those in the armed forces, when it gets close to a holiday. But how can we be consistent throughout the year, just as how we're consistent with with health or any other topics throughout the year? How can we not only but honor our veterans throughout the year? So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to hold events throughout the year and not only towards the end of the year, because Veterans Day falls in November, and that's when
Mhm.
everyone wants to celebrate and give free stuff to veterans. But I mainly want to focus. What about the rest of the other months? So I
Yeah.
think things like that to support the veterans, because veterans are people just like you and me.
Mhm.
They may have some special circumstances, especially when it comes to PTSD and mental health, but
Right.
they're regular Joes just like you and me, and just providing the support, which is why I founded Behind the Lava Lava Foundation, which is a nonprofit. It's a separate entity from Behind the Lava Lava podcast. I founded a nonprofit mainly to serve veterans, their families, and hopefully it can extend out to their extended families. It's just because I see a need and I want to fill the need,
Mhm.
and hopefully I answer your question. Just to hold more events, just to acknowledge that veterans are going through certain situations and circumstances.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that response. And I think the reason why I wanted to ask that of you is because, I see the things that you're working on in the community, but also, Pictar once a month goes out and we do Breaking Bread. And it's our barbecue style meal with the unsheltered community. And as we're out there, we actually run into a lot of veterans. And it's very, very sad to see that, like, these are people that served our country, that gave us an opportunity to have these options and these freedoms, right? And now they're in a circumstance where they don't have anywhere to live. And so, as I see the events that you are hosting and really promoting, I just wanted to know, like, is there other things that people could do to be more supportive of veterans? I think it's hard when you don't have involvement with someone who's served, right? And so maybe that's kind of where I was going with the question. And I think you made a great point of just there's a lack of it being acknowledged throughout the year, right? But what can, like, if I'm asking you specifically for myself, what can I do to really be more supportive? Is there something that I can do?
Again, that's a difficult question. Other than if you see an issue on social media or something that comes up on social media, just share it,
Okay.
because not everyone can donate, not everyone has the finances to support financially. But I think it's mainly if there's an event, you can volunteer your time or you just share it. It's very easy for all of us to press that share button on social
Yep.
media to provide that awareness.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
But thank you very much, Lulu, for joining me on Behind the Love Lava. I know these are some difficult issues that we have to bring about and bring awareness on, especially Alzheimer's, cancer, and caregiving. But it's also an issue that we need to bring to light. So I really appreciate you jumping on here and chopping it up with me.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation and hope that I shed a little bit of light for listeners and community members to be willing to come out and have discussions and share and understand and learn more. That's how we increase the knowledge in our community, is just being willing to.
Now, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Behind the Lava Lava. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow Behind the Lava Lava. Make sure you follow Lulu Wolfgramm, Pictar, UPIC, and all the other organizations that she's mentioned on their social media. Make sure you drop a comment, leave us a review. This is Michael Tan signing off. Tofaso Ifua.
taking all my interests, it's who I am. I'm trying to make these digits look like EINs. When the help ain't free, you all help me. Salute to folks who turn their names to LLCs. The wealth is in itself to help a non-profit. To be better women or better men, whether business by veterans or common folks with a dream. We're all born with the same strength. We tread waters that were untouched. Let's be on the same wavelength. Behind the lava, front of our eyes. Let our legacy live off it when we're up in the sky. All signs point to us to help someone make a difference. With God as my witness, let's talk business.